Okay, good afternoon, and welcome. Thank you for joining us here at AI House in Davos. My name is Mina Al-Oraibi. I'm the editor-in-chief of The National, based in Abu Dhabi, and delighted to be here moderating this conversation about smart, safe, sustainable, the AI-powered city. And it's incredible. This is one of those topics, whether you are a novice or an expert, it affects you because the vast majority of us live in cities, and increasingly, the world's population will be in urban centers, determined by some of the innovations and thinking that the people on stage with me today are doing at the moment. So AI in public transit, AI in predictive traffic management, AI in reducing crime rates, AI in waste management, in everything you can imagine, efficiencies, sustainability, but most important, citizen well-being. And how do we make sure that it's human-centric thinking that is developing these AI technologies, design and infrastructure thinking at the moment. Public spaces and culture also, of course, are affected by some of the planning and implementation at the moment. So to help guide us through some of these ideas and concepts, to my immediate left is the CEO of Presight, Pramotedham, and Juan Lavista Ferres, who's the Corporate Vice President, Chief Data Scientist, and Director for AI for Good Lab at Microsoft. And then Dr. Anna Gawlikowska is the CEO of SwissAI, one of the oldest companies actually working on this. And we have also Guillem Martínez, who's AI and Robotics Program Officer at ITU. So, Thomas, I want to start with you. You and the team at Presight have worked on the idea of smart city projects for some time around the world. What are the trends you're seeing?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you very much for having us, and to every one of you, welcome. Presight is actually part of the G42 ecosystem and also one of the founding members of the AI House. So this conversation that we're having all week has been intriguing, and we're so happy to have a panel with colleagues here to add on to it. Presight had the privilege of being a big part of Abu Dhabi's transformation journey. We were in 2019 and 2020, we started transforming multiple municipality and transportation systems. Today, the Abu Dhabi Department of Municipality and Transportation System uses a live transformation analytics system on traffic. We've started implementing some of these AI analytics into our national crisis management system, where we aggregate a first responder system like the 311 with the ability to respond and predict time, predict incidents, and also be able to lower the rates of mortality because it sends the right resources with the right equipment to the right places at the right time. And then further to that, at the heart of the government citizen services, we launched TAM, and we spoke about it at the UAE Pavilion. And TAM means done in Arabic. And what they've done is we've integrated a AI citizen, it's not a chatbot, a citizen assistant to help with the 3,500 services that the government does. A lot of this has made Abu Dhabi today in its journey to be an AI native government and in turn an AI native city. Mobility systems integrating with government infrastructure. Presight had the privilege to take this out to the region. At the same time, in the region, in the global south, not every city is like Abu Dhabi. So when we work with countries in Africa, you realize that basic infrastructure for the aspiration of smart city doesn't quite exist. Then it dials us back to what is the basic thing you need to retrofit an existing city. And some of the trends that we're starting to see now. No matter whether the city is a new city or old city, they want to do a few things. They want to do an integrated systems of systems. So a nervous systems where utilities meets public infrastructure, meets national security, public safety, meets healthcare and citizen services. The ability to bring that together is one aspiration that every city, every governor wants to meet. Second, hyper-personalization. The ability to understand how the city behaves, weekday traffic versus weekend population movement, the ability to understand these different nuances and incorporate that instinctively, proactively into a city system for traffic, for prediction of busy areas across different city centers has also been key. So these are two parts that we see. The very third one, the ability to bring in what we call, right now what we call agentic AI, right? And I'm sure Anna wants to discuss that a little bit more. SwissAI is a strategic alliance partner of Presight since last October. Anyway, agentic AI. So you start to see cities wanting AI assistance, the ability to have the AI support a command center to support the mayor to make decisions. Where we want to get to is one day that a city can autonomously function. The integration of autonomous system is probably one area that we want to see happen in the coming years.
I want to ask you a bit more about autonomous systems,
Yes.
but first I want to give Anna the opportunity to tell us a bit more about what we mean by agentic AI. We've heard about agent AI throughout the conversation. And how does that change how a city functions?
Well, I think that brings us to really the definition, at least our definition of AI-powered city. Because I think there's a lot of mix-up between agent-based AI and agentic AI. We hear a lot about the agents. Thomas mentioned citizen assistant. That would be an example of agents, right? And there is this big hype for agents. SwissAI 10 years ago modeled 500 million agents, which were individual components of a simulation framework with an AI component in it that takes individual decisions depending what is the surrounding environment, what is the offering in space. So these agents are acting in response to stimuli. So if we have a digital twin of environment, these agents will be released into new environments, perhaps with climate changes, with new real estate objects. We work with, for example, Kajima Corporation in Japan, which is building buildings. So this, the agents would react to the new provision of services in space. We know that the agent is hungry. We know that the agent is going at certain subset of his life path to buy an apartment. So that informs the demand. And demand is really what is the evolving component of a human-centric AI-powered city. So this is this sort of not top-down supporting elements of an agent which can book our flight, but we have a representation as humans, by the way, completely ethical. We are Swiss, so of course, nothing is, no ID of an agent is captured or followed. Completely GDPR compliant, probabilistic, stochastic. Quite amazing, actually, what this thing can do. And
But can I ask,
yeah.
is it attached to an individual?
Yes, so it's agents don't have to be individuals only. So that's an example of the agentic AI. We have multiple types of agents. So for example, in energy simulation framework, which we have as well, agents would be TSOs. And TSOs would have a different set of boundary conditions on which they, in time and space, take a decision. Or an agent could be autonomous car, which has a different set of conditions that it reacts to. So this is one element of the AI-powered city. The second element of AI-powered city is physics. And we are coming from a Maschinenbau, the actual, the department of Laboratory for Energy Conversion, ETH Zurich. So we are physics-based. I mean, we are mechanical-based. We are number-based. So what I mean by physics is AI could, or machine learning could potentially hallucinate, as we say, without railing it, without keeping it in this reality. So if you put physics, the ball will actually not fly here. It would do the right move. That's very key to the components of the city, which are physics-based, like energy mobility systems, all the engines and so on. Now, these two key elements of AI-powered city allow us to run scenarios of future, which is very critical with changing world. We are living in a very changing world, so we have to react. We have to be proactive rather than reactive. And we have many, many, many examples. I maybe bring just one. We were just selected by Swiss Ministry of Economy for a project we did with a team which is partially here, for Sarajevo city, for 4 years to be a lighthouse project of Swiss contribution, where we basically tested different urban plans and how, the tunnel drill in the city would get the agents through. What would that do with, future potential working of that reality? So that's just one of the examples. But on the business side, one can test infrastructures, increase profitability of these infrastructures, test all the different scenarios, both to improve resilience, but also to improve profitability and life quality of the citizens of the AI-powered city.
Thank you, Anna. Juan, I want to turn to you because, Thomas and Anna have put out a really kind of incredible vision of seeing, cities functioning, autonomous, citizen-centered, and making sure that it's safer, more efficient. What are the challenges?
I think the biggest challenge we have is complexity, correct? So if we have 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I started studying machine learning and these, there was a lot of papers already on intelligent cities, correct? And after 20 years, we haven't seen, of course, we have great examples on the use of AI in some cities, but not at the extent that we were thinking, correct? And a challenge, I think the biggest challenge we have as a society, as humans, is that we are addicted to complexity, correct? So we like complex things, we like complex projects. This is the reason, by the way, we put a person on the moon before we added wheels to your luggage. But it's true and it's problematic because if we want to impress people, the best thing that you can do is put a very complex solution. And you will get in the press, you will likely get funding. It's amazing, correct? But if you want to actually have an impact, your solutions need to be simple. Building simple solutions is hard. But there's already a lot. My biggest challenge and my biggest concern is there's a lot of very simple solutions that are out there that work, correct? But my concern from a society perspective is that we are always running against the most shiny, complex object without forgetting sometimes that there's a lot of solutions like intelligent routing of traffic. There's a bunch of solutions that work. So I would say, I think for me, what is important is publishing a paper is the easy part. The part that is difficult is making that to production. Working with cities, working with governments, understanding, and that is the part that I would love for us to focus. Is like how do we let's select things that work. Let's understand cities. Let's look at cities. By the way, majority of ideas, whether they are complex or simple, will fail. Correct. That's another thing that's a big lesson learned. Is like a lot of your great ideas will fail, but through the last 20 years, we have seen some ideas that work. Let's learn from cities that are doing the right thing. Simple solutions that are cheap. Ideally, solutions that do not require, for example, one project that we've been working now for last 2 years is that if you live in the US or Europe, we have this illusion that the maps of a city are up to date, correct? Because you can go to online and you see your house. But for significant amount of the world, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, some of these maps can be 10 to 15 years old. Yeah. And in some countries, like Niger, that population doubled in that period of time. So it means that half of the people in that country are not in any map, like half of the houses. So if you don't have maps of today, you don't know where you need to put the hospital, you don't know logistics. And that's the project that we have is that, hey, we can actually use satellite data. It's relatively cheap. You don't need to actually have people on the ground, and you can map it, correct? And if you have maps, you can work with the government. If the government have maps, they can understand logistics. So there's a bunch of relatively simple solutions that do not require a lot of investment and can bring a great value. And then, by the way, I'm not saying that other cities should be more advanced, but I would say we should start with simple things that work and then go from there. And don't forget, please, our addiction to complexity. Stay away from this addiction to complexity, and that will help.
But it's so interesting what you said, because actually when Thomas was talking about TEM, which is an app I use, and you can do everything from, get your lease registered so that your, water services come. You don't think of AI because you just think, oh, that's just an app. And so it's interesting how so much of the stuff we're beginning to adopt, but we don't necessarily think of it. We want the complex, where is the robot that's going to take my job kind of thinking. But that's a really interesting point. However, everything we've mentioned, of course, is data-based, right? And that is the most critical element of doing proper planning and having data. So, Guillem, I want to bring you in here because, there's always a concern about, well, who owns the data? How much do private companies own it? How much do governments own? How much agency do we have as individuals to be giving this data for planning? So what is your take on that? And what are the most important kind of guardrails to have?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So first of all, thanks for having us here. I'm Guillem Martínez. I'm the AI and Robotics Program Officer at the International Telecommunications Union. This is the United Nations specialized agency for digital technologies. And as Juan was mentioning, like about best practices, this is quite related to the work of the ITU. We develop technical standards that support the foundations of global growth in ICTs around the world. When it comes to smart cities and communities, this is the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 11. And we have seen that only one of the 10 targets of this SDG is on track, currently on track. And our recently published AI for Good impact report that was presented in October last year shows that AI can support 100% of these targets. So the potential is clearly there of AI to really improve and support in many of the urban challenges that we are facing today. How is the United Nations and the ITU contributing to these challenges that relate to data privacy, trust among citizens, and so on? So we have like two main initiatives. The first one is the United for Smart Cities and Communities. This is the United Nations platform that is led by the ITU together with the United Nations Commission for Europe and UN Habitat to share these exactly best practices among all, like many cities around the world on what works to support sustainable development. Sometimes leveraging new technologies to support sustainable development and share all these best practices among city administrators. So that's the main target of this initiative. Specifically, under this initiative, there is a working group that focuses on AI for cities. And in this working group, they are talking about like KPIs for smart cities and other domains. And the other part is the study group 20 of the ITU. This, as we were mentioning, how the importance of best practices, benchmarking, and so on. This is a study group on IoT, digital twins, and sustainable cities and communities. What basically does is to produce technical standards for those cities to work in different domains. And one of the examples, and I was seeing here before coming to this panel, I was seeing a robot. There was a presentation. I saw as well another robot in the streets of Davos. So to give you a very practical example is the ITU has produced a technical recommendation that looks into the technical requirements for the interoperability of autonomous robot systems in urban settings. And what does this recommendation do? So basically, it looks at how enable seamless interplay between autonomous robot systems in urban settings, a smart urban infrastructure, and end-user devices. So this is one of the examples. But under this initiative that I was mentioning, United for Smart Sustainable Cities and Communities, we have developed guiding principles on AI for cities. And these guiding principles are based on 5 use cases, and one of them being Dubai, one of the use cases. Then we have Copenhagen, then we have Hong Kong, and 2 other cities. And here in these different use cases, we see that across different cities, across different countries, priorities change. In Copenhagen, their main target is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve environmental efficiency. And they are doing that using different sensors to track the environmental efficiency of buildings and predictive analytics for basically ventilation or heating of different buildings in the city. But another example is Hong Kong, who their priority is aging population. And what do they do with the aging population? So basically, they have a system of different robotic devices, wearables, together with home sensors to track in a really elderly population and aging population, how if those people, they track their life signs and send an emergency call to then like an emergency response in case their caregivers can go and assist them. So we see how we develop these guiding principles really to ensure that there is a common framework, that it's flexible enough to be implemented in many cities around the world, and then to share these best practices and principles across different countries and cities.
Anna, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking about the simplicity of the solution, yet we are in AI house. And to me, we are at a certain point right now as our generation that AI is being born. The question is, there's questions, how is it powered? How do we power it? Where's the energy coming from and all of that stuff? To me, the question is, what do we use it for? What kind of questions should we ask it to help us with as global cities and communities? And I was privileged to be in an industrial roundtable yesterday with some of the CEOs and presidents of the largest industrial companies in the world. I was one of two ladies on that 40 people group. The only AI and the only startup, because we are the startup out of ETH. And there was a call for action for scenario making in the world of disruption, that we are actually using the systems of AI to be able to help us better foresee the impacts of the unprecedented change that is critical in critical systems, in fact, like energy systems. And to your point on spend, how expensive it is, yes, it is expensive. But currently, we are actually spending money perhaps not in the most efficient way, because we don't need all that data. Today I was thinking about my parents. I don't know if you have the same thing with your parents, but my parents used to collect a lot of wood and put it in the underground, cellar, and maybe it's going to be useful one day, It's a bit like this with data these days. We collect so much of it. We put all these IoTs, whatever, everywhere, and we don't really know what to do with it. And then the money is finished for the logic, for the models, for the math, for the prediction, because the money was spent. So yes, but let's spend the money properly.
And that's a great point about collecting data for the sake of collecting data. You see that across the board, but also what are you doing with that and what conclusions do you draw from that? But Thomas, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, this is a topic Anna and I debate quite often. The example that Juan brought up, and everyone wanted to jump in on your point, and I'd like to cite you one example. Presight's the digital transformation partner on a national program for Senegal, right, for the capital of Dakar. The president of Dakar, the leadership at the point in time says, I want to create 30,000 jobs. What can your AI and what can your big data analytics help us with it? The project that we landed with was that the addressing system and the mapping system of Dakar was completely non-existent. People would call and say, well, I'm here, I'm at the red building on the left. If you take 40 steps forward and take a left turn, you can deliver me my parcel. The solution we gave there was using AI, using remote sensing, to create a new e-addressing system for them. And what does that do? The e-addressing system gives them the ability to create a gig economy for drivers, for the Uber equivalents, to create jobs, to lift the daily wage of a single Senegalese up. Then on the flip side, Dubai set a goal to move 25% of all trips to be autonomous. Right, a very different set of AI that we need. Abu Dhabi, we have autonomous vehicle running on Yas Island. To understand the two and what drives has got two different simple solutions, complex and simple, but it's all driven not by the technology, not by the data itself, but by the need to actually change and make change.
What are you solving for?
What are you solving for? So Anna and I always say, the first city to buy the advanced AI has to be one with deep pockets.
Has to be what, sorry?
One with deep pockets.
Right.
So you need money
Yeah,
for it,
that's
right?
true.
It's expensive. But what about the rest of the cities? This week we debated on the equitable access for AI, from infrastructure to algorithms. How do we create a platform that will take this solution and make it accessible to everyone who needs it? Because if not, the ability to bring the digital divide closer between a less enabled, less developed country and one that is of Singapore, Dubai, Zurich will continue to be far apart. And I think that's beyond the challenges of privacy and data and what we use. That needs to be addressed. And collectively, ITU, the World Bank, World Organization should look at that and be less obsessed with the complexity of what AIs you want to use. But on the same note, the AI agents that SwissAI is doing is a clever way of helping a country that doesn't have data. So you go to a country like Senegal, there are no IoT sensors, there's no feeds, you hardly get enough mobile traffic to get any sense of it. There you use an AI to simulate the movement of people, movement of vehicles, the population, and then use that simulation to address master planning needs, address the siting of primary and secondary care facilities. Now that's a useful use of a complex AI algorithm to solve a problem that would have cost millions of dollars to use because you would put in all the infrastructure in place.
Okay, so I'm going to open the floor for questions. I have one question for Juan, and then I'm going to turn to you. So if you do want to ask a question, once I turn to the audience, please indicate to me. Yeah, it's okay. I'm being told I have a lot of time. I know I have time, but I feel like audiences deserve to ask questions, and then we'll bring it back to the panel because I think you've brought so many topics up, and I think it's fair to open it up. So, but please, when we give it, you're going to have to be patient until we get the mic to you. Okay, so I will come to you in a moment. However, Juan, I want to turn to you. You said something. You said 20 years ago, you would have thought we would have been more advanced in our adoption. So what adoption have you seen of AI that you think that's the right adoption? Give us a test case example of this was good. Keeping in mind the AI-powered city in that framework.
No, so I think that a lot of times we don't realize that, again, let's say the example of mapping is something that has been driven across the entire world, basically, correct? So as long as you have high-resolution satellite data, you have models that can take that high-resolution satellite data and map it, correct? And that is something that a lot of companies have been using, and these are investments that usually are not coming from, many times, are not coming from the government. They're coming from private sectors. Like, hey, we can actually do this, correct? And we give this for granted, correct? Like, you couldn't have Uber today if those maps, if you didn't have maps. Right? But it's there, the maps are there, it's complete. So clearly for me, using remote sensing today, it has been proven that you can actually have maps up to date. So, and maps are a fundamental piece of information that the city needs. Intelligent traffic lights is something that has also worked. There are different levels of solution. You have very dumb solutions, or you have more intelligent solutions, and this has been. But this is something that, again, is not a new solution. It's something that has existed for 20 years, and it works, correct? So, intelligent traffic lights will reduce the traffic jams, reduce emissions. It's all positive for the city, correct? This is an investment that if you look at a city and you have intelligent traffic lights, it pays for itself, correct? Right. It really pays for itself. Those are some of the examples that I like to see. And again, it's amazing how even in very developed countries, you don't see these technology. Even in sections of New York City, correct? You don't see this technology. There are countries, there are cities that have it, and it's great. And again, once they implement this, they realize how powerful is this information, basically.
And cities, for example, like Abu Dhabi having autonomous vehicles is so important to have because you need the test case, right? And then that's the only way you're going to be able to roll it out further. Okay, so time for questions. Okay, we have a question right at the back, but do we have someone first until we get the mic over there? Anybody else on the way as we collect the mic? Okay, we're going to have to pass the mic all the way back. Okay, so if you could kindly identify yourself and ask your question, that would be great.
Sure, Jim Harris. There's a saying by William Gibson, the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed. And we think, oh, driverless taxis, that'll never happen. But there's been 100 million miles, I feel Dr. Evil moment, 100 million miles driven primarily in Chinese cities, 19 Chinese cities. Now, when you look at the cost of driverless cars compared to car ownership, it's 2/3 cheaper. which means we don't need as many parking lots in cities, that getting around is easier. And then you can get to ride sharing, which drops the cost even further. Like I pick people up I don't know on the way to where I'm going. So how does this kind of planning, because it's all based on AI, change the way we should develop cities? Because AI enables this kind of transportation as a service model.
I can take part of that. So two things. I am a huge believer on driverless cars. Like, unless you smoke, and hopefully you don't smoke, driving a car is going to be the most dangerous thing you do in your life. Correct?
Wow.
1.3 million people die every year driving cars. That's much more than a city like San Francisco. Correct? Like so. Clearly, and it has been proven that driverless car, and we hope that it will never be zero. Correct? Like that's another problem that we have is that there's a lot of problems. Like if every day people die because they drive a car, but the minute a driver dies in an autonomous vehicle, that is news. Not only is news, it's like a whole debate. Like what are we doing? Correct? And just to be clear, that's one of the challenges for this particular use case, especially if you have humans on the other side. Correct? Because like if every single car out there was autonomous, the solution would be much simpler. The problem is when you have humans.
When you have the dumb people.
Because it's really difficult.
You want the smart cars, not the dumb people.
I'm not sitting in your car. I'm not sitting in your car the next time you come with that.
And by the way, if you ask everybody, we believe that we're better than the average. Correct? Like so in general, this is not a problem that applies to us, but it applies to us. Yeah. So I would say this is a use case that is very difficult. Correct? Yes, you have some examples where this is working. You ask a very good question. How cities need to be prepared for this? There's a lot of things that you can make it easy. A lot of times, the challenge that these cars have is that if and this has been proven by the way, if the road is not very well, it doesn't have well signal, then the car will not be able to drive it well. Correct? So if you have a city that is perfect, that all is like the signs are there, the cars are easy to identify, the colors of the car are easy to identify, you can make it much easier. So if we are thinking how to develop a city, the answer is yes, you should consider that hopefully in the next 20 years, I was hoping, my daughter is 11 years old, my son is 9, and I would love for my kids, because I'm worried about driving, I would love my kids do not need to drive, correct? But I don't know if we're gonna make it there. But let's say we make it in 15 years. We need to start thinking now to make it easy for these algorithms, basically. So I do think there are things there that can be done. But by the way, I want to say, even if we have those 100 million miles, the problem hasn't been solved. It's a very difficult problem. So,
yeah. Guillem, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, no, just like developing this a bit further. We not only for reducing like traffic accidents, but as well like for allowing people with disabilities to be able like to move around the city. I mean, all these use cases, we have been looking at them, and actually we have an initiative on autonomous and assisted driving, like to enable like all this mobility, like autonomous mobility around the world. But again, this comes back to what you were saying, that 2.4 billion people are still unconnected. There is no internet, there is no infrastructure. Different cities are at different stages and different priorities. So how to enable, I think here we need to be careful, because one city might want to have fully autonomous cars and autonomous drivers, but another city is like not ready for this big step. So somehow developing these principles-based guidelines, technical specifications, what we're trying is that every city, they can adapt according to their different needs, because we talk about like all this cutting-edge innovation, and in the end as well is which is the willingness of the governments to deploy these solutions, to create test beds in the different cities in Europe. We have seen in Europe, in a very small few cities, that this has been happening. You travel in the US, you travel in Asia, it's completely different. I have seen like plenty of innovations in the streets working well. So how to facilitate this innovation in a speed that fosters inclusivity and tackles this challenge that 80% of the population is going to be living in cities by 2050. So like solving this SDG 11 is most pressing than ever.
Thomas, you wanted to come in and I'll come to you.
just if we look at autonomous driving as one part of a smart city and where advance in technology is going, it's a very siloed view. Like, why does a city need autonomous vehicle? Chances are it's congested. Chances are you want to go to a net zero carbon aspiration. But fundamentally, it's a it's an isolated system. If the city goes towards interconnectivity, interconnected system where different systems are talking together, and you understand the better movement of people to combat what we want to do to make the city better, you want to create a 20-minute city where you want to move around, is to bring the soft policies and the hard policies, including the regulation of traffic lights. It's not just about autonomous vehicle, right? And the conversation about how to make a city possible so that you can have full self-driving around is a much different conversation. It's a complex vanity question.
Yeah.
Right? We are looking at that. We are moving from computer vision, which is what it is, which is why you need clearly defined marked lanes, to where the visual large language models are, where it's interpreting the way we interpret. So we don't need markers. We understand things are moving. So it's going to get there. But when it's there, what does it give us? It gives us a city that's automated, is cool. You're a futuristic city, like where your kids want to go to. But fundamentally, we still need to understand the SDG goals that wants to be solved. Can we replicate that? How many cities in the world today will have FSD? Should it be completely possible? Probably the same amount that have access to electricity that is not disrupted, that have access to connectivity, and then we're still foregoing a big part of the conversation on the advance in technology. How does it do for the betterment of society and communities itself? So I think we need to focus on that.
And I want to come to you, but first, Thomas, very briefly, if you could answer the question I have. I mean, how important is it to make sure that public transport is part of the thinking when we're talking about autonomous vehicles? Because I think, again, everybody gets excited about the idea of, my individual driverless car, but actually it has to be part of public transport. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible.
If you really have to do it, then you start from the master planning of the city. And then you start to integrate the multimodal transport system you would have. I mean, an autonomous vehicle need not be a car. I think China's running big trams and people movers, right? And that's because it's driven by the mobility movement within the city, weekend, weekday. So it's integrated. So it's not just about the vehicle itself. So you start from using the algorithms, whether it's machine learning, big data analytics on master planning, on the different types of city you want to, how you want to move your people, because the economics of the city will build around that. Then you come like, do I need a bus? Do I need a bus that is 100 meters long because every morning I need to move this number of people? Or do I need a fancy, spaceship-looking vehicle?
I'm still dreaming of the Jetsons version. Probably young people won't remember the Jetsons cartoon where they fly to work. So Jetsons is what I'm
Jetsons
dreaming
and
of.
Flintstones, that's kind of
That's
like
right,
where
between
exactly we're at
Jetsons and
altogether.
Flintstones. Anna, sorry, you've been waiting to come in.
No, that's perfectly fine. I very much enjoy everybody's inputs. Again, the self-driving cars would be agents, right? So they take their own autonomous decisions. But to interconnected system, I think it's very important because we modeled actually self-driving cars as agents as one of the master theses at ETH, I think, some years back. But one of the questions there was interesting. Also, of course, we need this agentic AI to see how it evolves and what dynamic does it create. And the question was, what regulations should we put on top of these self-driving cars? Because one of the things we saw was, depending how do you price the parking, the cheapest way to actually kind of own the thing would be not to park it, but to drive around.
Yep.
So you will have much more traffic jams evolving out of it. So it's extremely important to run these simulations, actually, particularly of unprecedented technologies, in an interconnected complex system, to be able to, once you release it, to do it correctly. Of course, there are some cities which say, well, we don't do it, we just open the, I don't want to name the city, but open the schools at a certain hour and see what happens with the traffic jam. And if it is too much, we open it in a different hour. But if you could do it instead in a simulation framework, that would be a bit better. And the thing is that it's not just the traffic jam. For example, in our simulation framework, it's also the energy, because these will be electric driving cars most probably. So we worked, for example, for Mercedes-Benz, where we optimized their charging infrastructure in all of Europe and all of NAFTA. And each single car has a battery, and that also, drains the power lines.
Sure.
So one of the ministries of transportation that we are talking to about these topics in a European country said, we want to know to which fleets, autonomous fleets, should we give actually, permissions to roll them out, because we are afraid that our grid will not be able to take it. So, it's the interconnected, multidimensional, holistic system. And we are playing on it as the technology is being rolled out.
Okay, so I've got a question here. If we could, lots of questions. Great. I always know when you break the first question. So we've got here, and then we'll come to the lady here. And I'll make sure we come around to all of you. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Tim Behrens, and thank you very much for the impulses. I have one point to Anna. I think you had a really nice comment on your analogy with the wood in the cellar. Think about what you want to do. I also ask this question in my company all the time. And as you guys all know, the limiting factor in AI ambition is always the availability and quality of data. So I asked myself the question, which data do I need in 2028, 2030? What will be the most valuable data set possible to fulfill my AI ambition in my domain? What would it be for you?
Okay, that's great. And no, actually, do you mind if we make it, what would it be for smart cities?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could all answer that, but very briefly so we can get in all the questions. So very briefly, most important data sets for smart cities in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, no, for us, it's not what is the most important data set, but I would say what are the standards around data processing and management frameworks for smart cities and communities. So basically how you have data that it's secure, privacy compliant, interoperability of this data to really raise the citizen trust that we are talking about. Because then you're going to be able to have all these new technologies deployed in cities, and citizens are going to be willing to make use of these technologies. So that's our focus is not that much of selecting which data would be used, but how to handle this data, the security that needs to be around it, data privacy compliant. So all of these are best practices that all these cities that we're talking about, they need to follow, basically.
Anna?
So for us, at least for the methodology that we are right now rolling out, the most important layer of our modeling framework is the population. And the population, which is the demand, which is the human-centric, design of these cities, how do we tick as different environments? We don't need that much data. We don't want actually that much data. We want to hands-off data. But we need some level of calibration data. And that depends on the use case which we are solving. So if we are solving, let's say, a case on transportation, we need to know what type of transport a person would be ready to use. But this very much depends on use case. So for example, we modeled COVID. I know it's a difficult case, but we were asked to help in the beginning of COVID. There was 8 cases in the country of Switzerland. And we were just starting the company. So we were just starting, was 1 month old after 12 years of R&D at ETH. And we are asked to help. So I said, well, let's help. Let's see what we can do. So the data set we needed at that point, the critical data set, was only collected in one place around the world, and that was South Korea. And that was the values they were collecting it because of Mars before. So they were sensitive to collecting that data. So we were able to use these to then project it on top of our models of the Swiss population. And we were under 5% error, and we published it for the prediction of the first wave without tracking a single person.
Wow.
But that's a complex question you ask. That's a very good question, and we actually are looking at rolling out the whole methodology now. We were to scale and see what we need and which use case we go one by one and what does it really mean. How much wood do we need?
Okay, Juan,
Would the woodchuck would?
would you add anything to that? But please be brief because I want to bring in other questions.
I think if I have to think, there are two main scenarios that I would say consider critical for a city. The first one is how people move within the city, correct? And this is something that today there's certain private sector companies that have that information, correct? So anytime that you navigate through your phone, anytime that you use one of the GPS navigators, this information is flowing. And that is critical information for a city. Unfortunately, sometimes that information is not available for the people that want to make decisions on that data, correct? That's a problem, a challenge that these have. If I had to consider a city, like I would try my best. If I were a mayor of a city, I would try my best to convince these companies to share this data in a privacy compliant way. Like, we don't want to know that you are moving, but we want to know how flows are moving, because this is something that will help city planning, correct? So for city planning, for help us understand where do we need roads, where are the congestions happening, all these data is critical. The second one, and I have to give a lot of credit to Abu Dhabi on that, is services, correct? Like, today, if we have more a central view of services and understanding, because that's how, a lot of times, that's how our individuals are interacting with the city. Services is critical, and of course, traffic and planning is also critical. Neither of these data sets, except for very few exceptions, are usually available for city planners. So,
I'll wrap quickly and I'll actually take both points, because a city is about how you live in a city. So the people population data is key, and what you do. So services and population. You're right that it doesn't exist today, and this is what we can do with advanced technology. Take what Anna is doing, go to a small data set. What you want to do is, for every node that is moving, you need to personify them. So the concept of hyper-personalization, if you have a set of simulated data of a known population that is generic enough to give you a sense of that, create a synthetic database, a synthetic data set out of that, which is what we're doing now for the large language models. You combine those two, you need to talk to 5 people to say, give me 10% of anonymous data, model it as agentic citizens, and then let it run in your whatever models you're running. I think that's the way to sum it up, but you always need the people. Everything a city is the people.
That's great. Okay, lady here. If we can get the mic, sorry.
Hi, my name is Esther de Boer. I think I would like to ask Thomas, we're talking about smart city as a result or as a goal, and coming from a not very smart city. But that's a way to go. And what kind of role can AI play in the transition from to?
Okay, and the gentleman next to you, and then we'll come back to you.
So I'm Singaporean, and like in 2011, the Prime Minister, the past Prime Minister said, Singapore will be a smart nation. 10 years later, we can't quite figure out what it is. Because a smart nation, a smart city, an AI city means so differently to the whoever is asking the question. So I think fundamentally, a smart city, like I say, is an interconnected systems. If energy transmission is the issue you're trying to deal with, then the first thing you make smart is smart utilities. And smart utilities feed that in. If housing and the distribution of communities and the way primary care and secondary care services are not well situated, and you need healthcare services to do prediction, aging, and so forth, then healthcare, a smart healthcare system it is. Fundamentally, the way to draw it from here to here is that I address the top priorities of the city first, but I keep in mind, as the governor, as the city mayor, that I need an underlying platform that will be able to plug in and allow these systems, as it's built, as technology advances, to be interconnected. To break the silos of city systems, I think is the key to make a city intelligent and smart. So as long as you're siloed, you will never get it, because we're never talking to each other.
Thank you.
My name is Imad Ad from EPFL. I see so far the discussion was around transportation. Are there any other aspects about smart aspects about the city that are not transportation? Thomas, you were talking about healthcare. Can you inspire also us about other aspects of life that can be turned into smart?
So, and I'll let the rest of the team come in, but the transportation is key because it's the most visible. Healthcare is the most impactful. So understanding the demographics of the residential community in different types of areas that you have. to plan out healthcare, including integrating the right type of doctors, the right type of treatments, the right type of facilities, and understand that that's healthcare. Right? Utilities is key. You have countries like South Africa who are still tripping between energy. To understand the distribution and load and allow an AI algorithm to do a microgrid to augment the distribution is probably the third. I think these are the three key ones that really impact the city.
I would add to those, I fully agree with those. I would add also at the building level, correct? So you need to heat the building. Unless you have this amount of people in a room, you will need like in winter you will need a heater. But like a lot of those decisions today are usually not done in a very intelligent way. And so anytime that we can invest, and that usually those are not going to be at the government level. This is going to be like mainly regulation or ways that if we have intelligent buildings, we're going to be consuming less amount. We're going to be consuming less amount of energy to make sure that these buildings are heated or cooled depending on the time. And that those are we have seen that at the micro level that can pay. These are buildings that can pay them for themselves. Correct. The other part is like you have cities that you have solar panels. Well, you need to make sure that these solar panels, whenever they're not being used for the building, they can actually contribute back to the grid. Intelligent grid is something that is critical, correct? Like a grid that can consume from the building to have electrification of cars. So a lot of that also aligns to the services. But at the building level, there's a lot of decisions that we should help them to make more intelligent, in a more intelligent way. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alan, then.
I always liked looking at the city as a living organism. So to me, we have all this nervous system, bloodstream, bones, cells being buildings, and the whole thing is dynamic. And and there's an evolution also within that of population. And the weather. The whole thing is moving. So it's not just the population. We build cities around the population, and we see their transport, as you said, it's visible. But for example, the nervous system is also critical, right? And then we have the energy component, which is really the pulse of where we are, where do we need heat, and so on. So for this, we need actually, for example, we used about a decade ago again the sensors to measure the demand. And then we have the demand for different types of services, different type of activities. That's all dynamic. Now, that is necessary to put the panels and the battery systems, which are dynamic. They can maybe be agentic because they take their own decisions. So it's multidimensional. It's not just transport. And you cannot look at one of them in vacuum, which is currently what the problem is.
Okay, we have one. I'm really sorry. We only have time for one last question, so I apologize, but we ran out of time. Please.
I'm Michael Walczak from ETH Zurich, and we are working together with Anna and SwissAI, and we believe that the biggest innovation is actually happening not in the developed countries, but in the undeveloped countries, because we can also leapfrog certain developments.
Is there a question? There's tons of people who want a question.
Yes, and just maybe a comment actually that...
No. The lady here, come on. We need questions. There are so many people dying for questions.
Just a question then. How is the AI translating into actual policies for planning in time, what Anna mentioned, in 4 dimensions, because we have to shift from static planning to dynamic planning with policies.
Okay, thank
54 seconds to answer.
Yes. This lady, please ask your question very quickly.
Sure. So my name is Asakti. Anna, thank you for representing women. Very happy. My question is, I know we talked about data, use cases, all of that is great. What does the adoption look like? What are we going to do to increase the adoption level? Because it's still it's a buzzword for a lot of us, right? So I would like to hear what are we going to do to increase the adoption level?
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, make it easy.
Make it simple and easy.
Okay.
And start from the problem to the solution, not the other way around.
Make it useful.
Yeah.
If it's useful, you don't question like what we are talking about now.
Know the end game.
Yeah.
Policies. Do you want to take that question?
Policies is a type of a scenario. So we can run different policies, see what happens before we roll them out. And, you know, there could be some, we're asked to, for example, model migration policies in Switzerland by the SIA. So, you know, which parts of Switzerland will need what amount of land for housing. But in terms of adoption, I mean, we have to start with leadership. And there needs to be someone taking ownership. Then we develop the methodology, we make it bulletproof as much as we can because it's going to develop, keep on going. And then we need collaboration, and then we need, you know, representation. And well, it's a journey. It's not going to be an easy one. We are very open to work with people and make it really, you know, transformative. But it's going to be a community. And I feel, for example, in Davos, it was such an amazing community here. So, yeah, I mean.
Guillem.
Yeah, no, I think what you need to bear in mind is what's already available, you know. And we have seen that all these, you know, like high-level principles that we have on inclusivity, sustainability, fairness, transparency, how to move from these high-level principles to implementation. And implementation goes through a standardization. And for standardization, trusted partner is ITU. We have our AI for Good platform to convene all these discussions.
Yeah.
And I invite you, you know,
All right, so thank you all for being here. Thanks for the panel.
Whatever.